for music.
2024 was honestly a fantastic year for music. Some of the biggest names all releasing at once, to being strung along by some of our other favorites, to huge tours and announcements for even bigger tours. We got ourselves a very good slate of music. I did a lot of listening to new records this year, so I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring, especially because I haven't made a video in months, and share some of my favorites of this year. Some of these will get their own video, others I just wanted to share my feelings on. Also, not all of them are hip-hop or rap, despite that being my whole thing, but I highly recommend all of these records no matter the genre. And finally, none of these are in any particular order, just my thoughts. Alright, let's get into it. First off, some honorable mentions. Some of these were just either not full albums or were a little too inconsistent but had some great hits. First, we have Samara Sin's The Drive Home. Samara came on my radar earlier this year with her single Moving Day, and I think her EP was very, very good. I'm pretty excited to see her go on tour with Smino next year. A very stylish EP. Personal favorites are Center, Entry 149, and 100 Square Foot. I ended up coming away with more songs than I expected from We Don't Trust You. While its follow-up really didn't impress me, I think this album was way more hits than it was misses. Even some of the deeper cuts on it, like GTA or Claustrophobic, all end up holding up very well. Although I think hearing Carti's verse on Type Shit is going to give me nightmares until that album drops. Anyways, I think it helps that we've had 9 months to let this one marinate. My biggest problem with this record is that it's a bit too long. Even if they cut it down to 14 or 13 songs, it might be one of the best hip-hop projects of the year. My favorites are Claustrophobic, Fried, Everyday Hustle, and Cinderella. I wasn't the biggest fan of the entire project of Almighty So 2, but the hits on it were absolutely fantastic. The whole project is generally pretty inconsistent, but then I listen to Runner and completely forget that. Same with Tony Montana Flow, Jesus, and Prince Charming. Really just kind of shoehorn this record in just to talk about these songs. But I mean, like, seriously, go listen to Runner and tell me that's not one of the best songs of the year. And my last honorable mention, shout out to this newest Kaiyote project. This was the first brand new album I listened to this year, and it still holds up. Callie has been an artist I've loved for a long time, and I always tune into her newest projects. I just think this one barely misses one of my favorites because I don't often spin the entire album, but a lot of the songs are still on rotation for me. Young, Rich, and in Love, Mi Pongo Loca, Te Mata are my personal favorites. I really love the ethereal vibe created by some of the songs, and then the more upbeat reggaeton tracks. Great album. On to my actual favorites of the year. We're going to start off first with Adrienne Lenker's Bright Future. Lenker's knack for creating simple and heartbreaking pieces of music is something I think is completely underappreciated. Coming off a 2022 record with Big Thief and a big single the year after, Bright Future is Lenker's first studio album since her 2020 masterpiece, Songs. While I don't think Bright Future is really anywhere near Songs in terms of cohesion and quality, that's not to take away from the whole project. The emotions run through this record are just as potent as always, and the songwriting is on point as always. The sound palette on this record is an interesting change of pace, leaning much more into the folky elements on songs like Lenker's version of Vampire Empire. Some of the songs that do feel a bit more like moments on songs like No Machine stand out, but as do the tracks that do something new. My personal favorite on here is Already Lost, a song that uses its punky folk strings in the background and Lenker's beautiful voice to create a beautiful reflection on change of perspective. I also like the more stripped back Cell Phone Says, letting Lenker's voice really do the heavy lifting. And a shout out to the bonus track Once a Bunch, an absolutely beautiful and bittersweet track that really harkens back to some John Prine sounds. Would be my favorite by far on this record if it wasn't technically only a bonus track on the Japanese release of this album. Honestly, what Lenker does on Bright Future is exactly what I look for in a singer-songwriter album. Tightly written songs that deliver emotions unique to that artist, and that's exactly what Bright Future does. This record came out in March, 9 long months ago, and has been sitting with me since. So much has changed in that time, but you know a record is good when you can relate to it and find something new and beautiful within it in many different contexts. My favorites here are Donut Seam, Already Lost, Sadness as a Gift, and Candle Flame. This is one of the records that's going to get its own video, so I'm mainly going to keep it pretty personal. GNX is the most recent release on this list, and I honestly didn't expect to like it as much as I did, coming off his last record where, frankly, I was a little disappointed. GNX did something fresh that I only thought was a pipe dream from 2023. Kendrick doing a full-on West Coast album full of hits was one of those I wish, but I don't think I'll see feelings that I have about a lot of artists. This thing has really been on repeat since it randomly released in the latter half of November. It's extremely re-listenable, maybe his most replayable record ever. The best part is that it remains just as perfectly written as the rest of his catalog. The aggression all over this record is infectious. The intro of Whacked Out Murals is an anthem full of spite, perfectly setting up the rest of the record. There are many moments on this record that I love that have already gotten their recognition. The 2 SZA features, TV Off's beat switch, reincarnated storytelling. I generally seem to agree with most of the popular narratives of this record. The title track is a bit too long and winding in a bad way. But honestly, I think I like this album more than the average listener. I think Peekaboo is so much fun. Dodger Blue was a favorite of mine on first listen, and still remains up there with me. But The Heart Part 6 is one of my favorite Kendrick tracks ever now that it's sat with me for a minute. The sampling of an R&B classic mixed with that absolutely perfect funk-inspired production, mixed with the Last Call-esque storytelling. This is the best project since T-Pab to me. Top 3 Kendrick for sure. Maybe, just maybe it's recency bias, but I think GNX does something very special here. I definitely want to go in depth on this release, so expect that at some point. My personal favorite are The Heart Part 6, Dodger Blue, Luther, and Squabble Up. This is not at all an album I expect to like as much as I did. I've listened to other Charli projects and just thought like, okay, not really my thing. So when Brat was getting all the buzz it was, I thought I'd pretty much feel the same. Interestingly though, I could not stop playing a lot of these tracks on this record. It took me a couple phases. I found myself connecting to the bigger hits like 365 and 360 first. Then I really started getting into the synth work and production all over this thing. The more cinematic moments captured me way more than I thought they would. Club Classics is an insanely well-produced song. Same with Rewind, B2B, Talk Talk. Honestly, the whole record is full of an energy unlike anything else I've really heard this year. I struggle to really find the words to describe how much I enjoyed this project. It's addicting, it's infectious, it's a trip. It's not the most lyrically dense record, but what it lacks in lyrical depth, it makes up for in fun and energy. There are a couple songs I find myself skipping when I go back to this one, like So I or Mean Girls, but then I just find myself replaying B2B or Talk Talk like 100 times. If you avoided this record for whatever reason, you are missing out. I get that certain records have a certain stigma to them, or they're just everywhere and the oversaturation gets to be a bit too much. But seriously, you're doing yourself a disservice by avoiding records for whatever reason you may have. My favorite songs on this thing are Club Classics, B2B, 365, and Talk Talk. I know I said at the top of this video that there's really no order to this, but I'm very close to just calling this record my favorite one of the year. Leon Thomas has been one of those underrated hitmakers of this decade, producing and co-writing some of the best R&B and hip-hop cuts out there. Pipe Down by Drake, Snooze by SZA, Nardo Wick's Wicked Freestyle, Ye's Burn, and he got his start from Nickelodeon of all places. His solo record last year, Electric Dusk, was one of my favorite projects of the year, and the song X-Rated specifically has still been on rotation for me, so I was very excited to hear what he had up next. And Mutt was far from disappointing, and one of my favorite R&B records of the decade so far. The whole record is full of absolutely stellar production, cinematic and slick. His performances are great here too. Songs like Far-Fetched and Answer Your Phone really let him get in his singing bag, the latter being a favorite song of mine from this year. This album is a very solid and tight R&B experience, no filler at all. The title track is a great example of his style. It seems like it's been his biggest solo hit since, even getting Freddie Gibbs to hop on the remix, and I'm really happy he's getting his flowers. If you've tapped into the R&B scene, I'm preaching to the choir, but seriously, Leon Thomas's Mutt is not to be slept on. My favorite songs are the title track, Lucid Dreams, How Fast, and Vibes Don't Lie. This one's definitely a personal pick, but Hiatus Kaiyote is an act that I don't think has a bad song. This R&B / modern jazz / neo soul group has so many amazing tracks that create an atmosphere like no other. and their newest album, Love Heart Cheat Code, is no different, with production inspired by some of the greats in their genre, like Jay Dilla on some of the tracks, and then other ones really leaning into some unique and explosive instrumentation, like on Cinnamon Temple and White Rabbit. Variety is really what sets this album apart from their others for me. They really do get silly on this album. Look at Long Cat and the swirling instrumental. On the other hand, they peel back and do some of their chillest tracks on here too. Make Friends and Telescope come to mind for me. But again, the production is sort of the star of the show, as with every one of their projects. It's a bit hard for me to really describe what I love about this record. I'd honestly just go give it a listen for yourself. If you like jazz, funk, and neo-soul, you probably already know Hiatus Kaiyote, but give this record a shot if you haven't already. My favorite songs are Dimitri, Telescope, and the title track Love Heart Cheat Code. I'll be honest, this was the very first time I tapped into MJ Lenderman. I really had no idea what to expect. I just heard some buzz around it from some friends who had similar tastes in folky slacker rock like Alex G. Also, apparently he was on that newest Kevin Abstract project. Anyway, to say that I was pleasantly surprised would be an understatement. Like I've said on all these projects, I think the production and instrumentation is the highlight here. Everything is mixed and assembled to perfection. His voice rests in a perfect middle ground on so many of the tracks here. It's almost a country album, the way the strings and guitar works take center stage on many of the tracks. The songwriting here is also fantastic. Songs like Rip Torn or the intro track Manning Fireworks are heartbreakingly intriguing. It's also surprisingly catchy, which is another example of great songwriting. Songs like She's Leaving You really call back to 90s slacker rock like Pavement. The lyrics also give a similar vibe, with lazy and tongue-in-cheek lyricism everywhere. This really feels like a magnum opus level work from an artist. Really an album that evokes extreme emotion while being endlessly replayable. Admittedly, I don't know much about MJ Lenderman, so I'll be digging a little deeper into his catalog if this is the quality I can expect. Crafted to perfection in every sense of the word, Manning Fireworks was one of the biggest surprises from this year for me. My favorites are Rip Torn, She's Leaving You, and Joker Lips. Finally, we talk about Chromacopia, another extremely solid outing for Tyler. While it doesn't break my personal top 3 Tyler albums, I definitely have it above Call Me If You Get Lost after some further listening. I think this album has a lot going for it, but 1 or 2 duds. However, I think it makes up for it by being an extremely cohesive album with some gigantic highlights. Generally, comparing it to the other album from a huge artist in GNX, I think the highs are higher on here than on GNX, but consistently that one is the better album. However, let me stop being ticky-tacky and describe how much I actually enjoy this record. Like I said, some absolutely amazing highlights that I already think breach top 10 Tyler. My personal favorite on here is Take Your Mask Off, but songs like Darling I, Like Him, Ratata are all fantastic for different reasons. It also has some of Tyler's slowest moments, not necessarily in a bad way, but Judge Judy, Tomorrow, and Hey Jane all have something really interesting to say. I will definitely also be talking about this one more in depth at some point. I'm sure this album makes a lot of people's personal favorites of the year list, and for good reason. I'm excited to see this one live on tour. I'm sure he'll put on a great show, and I'm glad that Tyler is still making some really good music. My personal favorites here are Take Your Mask Off, Darling I, Noid, and I Hope You Find Your Way Home. Finally, what list of 2024's best would be complete without Die Lit by Playboi Carti? His mix of minimalist lyricism and stripped-back trap instrumentals create an environment unlike any other, inspired by the So that's my list. I think this was an amazing year for music, and it feels like there are so many albums coming up in 2025 that may even surpass this year. What was your favorite album of this year? Were there any that you thought I missed? If you liked what you saw, leave a like, a comment, a subscribe, whatever you got. Thank you so much for watching.